The recent security pact between Russia and North Korea represents a significant shift in global geopolitics. The meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un has sent ripples across the international community, particularly in the West. This growing alliance challenges the hegemony of the West, particularly the United States and its NATO allies, in ways that many in Washington and Western Europe have failed to recognize fully. While the West often frames Russia as isolated and friendless on the global stage, this could not be further from the truth. In reality, Russia enjoys a web of alliances and partnerships that span across Asia, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Latin America, and Africa. The security pact between Russia and North Korea is just the latest manifestation of this reality. The West's continued refusal to acknowledge the geopolitical influence of Russia and its non-Western allies reflects a profound ignorance that could have serious consequences for global stability. This article will explore the intricacies of the Russia-North Korea Security Pact and its implications for global power dynamics. We will also examine how Western hypocrisy and arrogance are contributing to the West's declining influence on the world stage as Russia cements its partnerships with a diverse array of global powers. The Russia-North Korea Security Pact, an overview. In a highly publicized meeting, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un announced a security pact that has significant implications for both countries. For Russia, the alliance with North Korea comes at a time when it is facing increased isolation and sanctions from the West due to its ongoing conflict with Ukraine. For North Korea, the pact offers a rare opportunity to expand its diplomatic influence beyond the confines of East Asia, while simultaneously benefiting from Russia's military and technological prowess. Military cooperation and arms exchange. One of the most significant aspects of the Russia-North Korea Security Pact is the potential for military cooperation. Reports suggest that the two nations are considering an exchange of military technology and arms, with North Korea potentially supplying artillery shells, rockets, and other weaponry to support Russia's ongoing operations in Ukraine. In return, Russia could provide North Korea with advanced military technologies, including missile systems, which would significantly bolster Pyongyang's defense capabilities in its ongoing standoff with South Korea and the United States. North Korea's arsenal, although not as technologically advanced as Russia's or the West's, is vast and capable. The idea that Russia could benefit from North Korean weaponry to further its military objectives in Ukraine shows that Russia is far from friendless. Instead, it reveals the power of its strategic partnerships, especially with nations like North Korea that are eager to cooperate against the perceived threats posed by the West. Strategic benefits to both countries. This pact provides clear strategic advantages for both Russia and North Korea. For Russia, the alliance allows it to circumvent Western sanctions, access alternative sources of military supplies, and potentially gain access to North Korean markets for its exports. For North Korea, it provides much-needed economic support and political legitimacy at a time when it remains under heavy international sanctions. Russia's interest in partnering with North Korea is clear. It allows Moscow to form a stronger strategic bloc against the West. While the United States and its NATO allies attempt to isolate Russia, partnerships like the one with North Korea prove that Moscow still commands respect and allegiance from key international actors. Russia's pivot to the east is not an isolated incident, but part of a broader strategy. With its relations with the West in shambles following the Ukraine conflict, Russia has increasingly turned its attention to Asia. Here, it has found willing partners in China, India, and now North Korea. This pivot is part of a larger geopolitical shift in which non-Western nations are banding together to challenge the hegemony of the United States and its allies. The partnership with North Korea solidifies Russia's influence in East Asia, providing Moscow with a strategic foothold in a region that has traditionally been dominated by US influence. With China and North Korea as allies, Russia has the potential to form a formidable bloc that could reshape the geopolitical landscape in Asia. See. The Western narrative regarding the Russia-North Korea Pact is deeply flawed. Many in the US and Europe view this alliance as a desperate attempt by Russia to find friends in a world where, according to the West, Russia is supposedly isolated and weak. However, this perspective is based on a gross misunderstanding of global politics. The West loves to propagate the myth that Russia is isolated and friendless on the global stage, yet the reality is starkly different. Russia has built and maintained strong ties with major global powers such as China, India, and even Turkey, a NATO member that has increasingly distanced itself from Western policies. Moreover, Russia enjoys cordial relations with numerous nations in the Middle East, Latin America, and Africa, all of whom view Moscow as a counterweight to Western dominance. While the West has invested heavily in portraying Russia as a pariah state, it has failed to acknowledge that many countries across the world share Moscow's disdain for Western interventionism, hypocrisy, and the imposition of so-called democratic values. Nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America in particular have suffered from decades of Western exploitation and interference in their domestic affairs. For them, Russia represents a valuable partner in the fight against Western imperialism. The outrage in the West over Russia's partnership with North Korea reeks of hypocrisy. The United States and its allies have formed alliances with far more controversial regimes over the years, including Saudi Arabia, which has been accused of numerous human rights violations. Despite this, Washington has continued to provide Riyadh with military aid and political support. In contrast, when Russia forms an alliance with North Korea, an equally controversial regime, the West is quick to condemn Moscow as reckless and dangerous. This double standard exposes the moral bankruptcy of Western foreign policy. The United States and its allies have no qualms about partnering with regimes that serve their strategic interests, regardless of their human rights records. Yet, when Russia does the same, it is painted as a rogue state that threatens global stability. This level of hypocrisy is not lost on much of the world, particularly in regions like Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, where nations are increasingly aligning themselves with Russia and China as a way to resist Western domination. Far from being isolated, Russia has succeeded in expanding its influence across multiple continents, forging partnerships with nations that are increasingly disillusioned with the West. The Russia-North Korea Pact is only the latest example of Moscow's growing global reach. Russia's most significant partnership is with China, a nation that shares Moscow's disdain for Western interventionism and its desire to reshape the global order. The two nations have deepened their military, economic, and diplomatic ties in recent years, forming a powerful counterbalance to United States' influence in Asia and beyond. China has been instrumental in helping Russia circumvent Western sanctions, providing Moscow with an economic lifeline as it battles against Western efforts to isolate it. The two nations have also engaged in joint military exercises, signaling to the world that they are prepared to stand together against any potential Western aggression. Russia's influence in the Middle East has grown substantially in recent years, particularly through its military intervention in Syria, where it played a pivotal role in preserving the Assad regime. This intervention not only solidified Russia's position as a key player in the Middle East, but also sent a clear message to the world. Russia is willing and able to protect its allies from Western attempts at regime change. Russia has also maintained strong ties with nations such as Iran and Turkey. Iran in particular views Russia as a crucial ally in its efforts to resist US sanctions and military threats. Meanwhile, Turkey's growing estrangement from the West has pushed it closer to Russia, as Ankara seeks to chart an independent foreign policy that is not beholden to NATO or the EU. In Africa, Russia has emerged as a key partner for many nations that are disillusioned with decades of Western interference in their internal affairs. Countries like Sudan, the Central African Republic, and Algeria have all turned to Russia for military and diplomatic support as they seek to resist Western attempts to control their political futures. In Latin America, Russia has maintained strong ties with nations such as Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, all of whom view Moscow as a valuable ally in their fight against US imperialism. Russia's support for these nations has allowed it to establish a foothold in a region that has traditionally been dominated by US influence. The Russia-North Korea Security Pact, along with Moscow's expanding global influence, is indicative of a larger trend, the decline of Western hegemony. For decades, the United States and its NATO allies have dominated global politics, imposing their values and interests on nations across the world. However, this era is coming to an end as Russia, China, and other non-Western powers rise to challenge the status quo. One of the most striking examples of the West's declining influence is its failure to effectively isolate Russia through sanctions. Despite imposing some of the harshest sanctions in history, the West has been unable to cripple Russia's economy or force Moscow to change its behavior. Instead, Russia has managed to adapt and thrive by forging new partnerships with nations that are willing to defy Western pressure. The sanctions regime has also exposed the limitations of Western economic power. While the United States and its allies may control a significant portion of the global economy, they do not control the entire world. Russia has successfully found alternative markets and trading partners in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, allowing it to bypass many of the economic restrictions imposed by the West. This has severely undermined the effectiveness of Western sanctions and demonstrated the limitations of the Western-led global financial system. Moreover, the sanctions have accelerated Russia's economic pivot to the east, especially towards China and India, which are eager to deepen economic ties with Moscow. China, for instance, has become Russia's largest trading partner, with energy exports playing a crucial role in strengthening bilateral relations. Similarly, India, despite pressure from the West, has continued to purchase Russian oil and weapons, showcasing the failure of the United States to sway these key Asian players. The West's reaction to the Russia-North Korea Pact is symptomatic of a broader problem, the arrogance and ignorance that pervades Western foreign policy. Many in Washington and Brussels continue to operate under the assumption that the world revolves around the United States and Western Europe. They fail to recognize that the global balance of power is shifting and that countries outside the West, especially in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, are no longer willing to accept Western dominance. The idea that Russia is isolated, weak, and desperate for allies reflects a profound misunderstanding of global geopolitics. While the West continues to congratulate itself for isolating Russia, the reality is that Moscow has found willing partners across the world, all of whom share a common interest in resisting Western hegemony. This arrogance is particularly evident in the Western media, which consistently downplays the significance of Russia's alliances with countries like China, Iran, Turkey, and now North Korea. At the same time, Western ignorance is on full display when it comes to understanding the motivations of these non-Western countries. Many in the United States and Europe view nations like North Korea, China, and Iran as irrational actors that are only interested in opposing the West for the sake of opposition. However, these countries are motivated by a desire to secure their own sovereignty and national interests in the face of decades of Western interference and coercion. The Russia-North Korea Pact is yet another indication that the world is moving away from a unipolar order dominated by the United States and its allies, and towards a multipolar world where power is more evenly distributed among several key players. Russia and North Korea, along with China, Iran, and other nations, are at the forefront of this transformation. This emerging multipolarity represents a significant threat to the West, as it undermines the ability of the United States and its NATO allies to dictate global affairs. In a multipolar world, countries like Russia and China are able to form strategic alliances that challenge Western dominance, thereby creating a more balanced and equitable international system. The Russia-North Korea Security Pact also highlights the growing importance of regional alliances in this multipolar world. While the West continues to focus on its traditional alliances in Europe and North America, countries in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa are forging new partnerships that bypass Western institutions and norms. This trend is likely to accelerate in the coming years, as more countries seek to free themselves from the constraints of the Western-led global order. Western hypocrisy on global security. The Western reaction to the Russia-North Korea Security Pact has also revealed the deep hypocrisy that lies at the heart of Western foreign policy. The United States and its NATO allies routinely criticize Russia for forming alliances with countries that they deem to be rogue states or pariah regimes. Yet the West has no qualms about maintaining close ties with authoritarian regimes that serve its own strategic interests. The West's alliance with Saudi Arabia. One of the most glaring examples of Western hypocrisy is the United States' long-standing alliance with Saudi Arabia, a country with a dismal human rights record and a history of exporting extremist ideologies. Despite Saudi Arabia's role in the war in Yemen, a conflict that has led to one of the worst humanitarian crises in modern history, the United States continues to provide Riyadh with military aid and political support. The United States justifies its alliance with Saudi Arabia on the grounds of regional stability and security cooperation. Yet it condemns Russia for forming similar alliances with countries like North Korea. This double standard is not lost on the rest of the world, particularly in the Middle East and Africa, where nations have grown weary of Western lectures on human rights and democracy, while the West itself continues to back authoritarian regimes. The US's relationship with Israel. Another example of Western hypocrisy is the United States' unconditional support for Israel, despite its ongoing occupation of Palestinian territories and its violations of international law. While the United States claims to be a champion of human rights and democracy, it turns a blind eye to Israel's actions, providing the country with billions of dollars in military aid each year. At the same time, the United States condemns Russia for its actions in Ukraine and for forming alliances with nations like North Korea, portraying Moscow as a global threat to peace and stability. This double standard exposes the West's selective approach to international law and human rights, where violations are tolerated if they are committed by allies, but condemned if they are committed by adversaries. The West also fails to acknowledge the role that NATO has played in destabilizing regions around the world. From the bombing of Yugoslavia in the 1990s to the intervention in Libya in 2011, NATO has a long history of military interventions that have led to widespread chaos and suffering. Yet when Russia engages in military operations, such as its intervention in Syria or its actions in Ukraine, the West is quick to portray Moscow as a global aggressor. This hypocrisy is particularly evident in the West's response to the Russia-North Korea Pact. While the US and its NATO allies routinely engage in military partnerships and arms deals with countries around the world, they condemn Russia for doing the same with North Korea. This double standard only serves to further undermine the West's credibility on the global stage. The Russia-North Korea Security Pact has far-reaching implications for global geopolitics, particularly in terms of shifting power dynamics in Asia and the broader international order. Shifting power in East Asia. The Security Pact between Russia and North Korea signals a significant shift in the balance of power in East Asia. For decades, the region has been dominated by the United States and its allies, particularly South Korea and Japan. However, the growing alliance between Russia, North Korea, and China presents a serious challenge to US influence in the region. With Russia providing military and technological support to North Korea and China continuing to back both countries, the US faces the prospect of a powerful bloc of adversaries in East Asia. This bloc could undermine US efforts to maintain its military presence in the region and weaken Washington's ability to project power in the Asia-Pacific. Additionally, the Russia-North Korea Pact complicates the security situation on the Korean Peninsula. By strengthening Pyongyang's military capabilities, Russia is effectively giving North Korea the tools it needs to resist US and South Korean pressure. This could lead to increased tensions and a further escalation of the arms race on the peninsula. Impact on the Ukraine conflict. The Russia-North Korea Pact also has significant implications for the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. If North Korea provides Russia with military supplies and support, it could bolster Moscow's efforts to counter Western-backed Ukrainian forces. This, in turn, could prolong the conflict and make it more difficult for the West to achieve its objectives in Ukraine. Moreover, the pact highlights the futility of the West's attempts to isolate Russia. Despite facing unprecedented sanctions and international pressure, Russia has not only maintained its military operations in Ukraine, but has also expanded its network of alliances. The Russia-North Korea Pact serves as a stark reminder that Moscow is not as isolated as the West would like to believe. A strengthened anti-Western bloc. Perhaps the most significant geopolitical implication of the Russia-North Korea Pact is the formation of a strengthened anti-Western bloc. With Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and other nations increasingly aligning themselves against the US and its allies, the global order is becoming more polarized. This bloc, driven by a shared opposition to Western interventionism and a desire to reshape the international system, has the potential to challenge Western dominance on multiple fronts. This anti-Western bloc is not just limited to military and security cooperation. It also extends to economic and diplomatic realms. Countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America are increasingly looking to Russia and China as alternatives to the West, particularly when it comes to trade, infrastructure development, and political support. This shift is eroding the West's ability to dictate the terms of global governance and shaping a more multipolar world. Conclusion: the West's ignorance and decline. The Russia-North Korea Security Pact is a clear indication that the global balance of power is shifting. While the West continues to operate under the assumption that it is the center of the world, Russia and its non-Western allies are forging new alliances that challenge the status quo. This growing anti-Western bloc, driven by a shared disdain for US hegemony and Western hypocrisy, represents a serious threat to the established global order. The West's failure to acknowledge the significance of the Russia-North Korea Pact and its broader implications for global geopolitics demonstrates a dangerous level of arrogance and ignorance. If the US and its allies continue to underestimate Russia's global influence and dismiss the importance of its alliances, they risk further accelerating their own decline.